Alexander Slater, Deputy Managing Director of the United States India Business Council. Welcome to Strat News and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'd just like to say congratulations to Strat News Global on its one-year anniversary. It's a wonderful platform, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Appreciate it. If I can get straight into the meat of what we want to talk about, which is a US-India deal of sorts, and we've been hearing about it for years now. There was some movement, it seemed like. But now with the Biden administration coming in, what do you think will be the priority in terms of the administration, especially since domestic affairs would probably take up most of his time?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable observation. There's a significant zone of agreement between the U.S. and India on specific topics for a mini trade deal. These apply to pricing for medical devices, the reinstatement of the generalized system of preferences for Indian agricultural products, and an institutionalized framework for talking about intellectual property rights in the commercial space. So we think that there's still a possibility, even in the waning days of a Trump administration, for something to happen. But if it doesn't, we do think that the Biden administration is positively disposed towards India and would be looking to make progress in the relationship because there's been a significant foundation that's been built over the last 4 years. At the same time, as you note, the Biden administration has made clear that domestic priorities are going to take most of its attention in the early days, tackling COVID-19, restoring the American economy, and dealing with or healing with some social divisions are all things that the Biden administration has highlighted as what it will be focused on going forward. It's also important to note that, President President-elect Biden has a thoroughly distinguished career in the international affairs space. So I think, notwithstanding these significant domestic priorities, foreign affairs will take an important place in his mind and on his agenda.
In terms of some kind of a deal, do you think it will charter the same course? Like, again, will we be looking at some kind of a limited deal before a free trade agreement is sorted out?
I think that's a reasonable assumption. The thing about reaching a free trade agreement or a mini trade deal now is that it would lay the foundation for a much larger deal later on and create momentum in the relationship. It's why we're hopeful that something could still be worked out in the next few weeks. But again, if it's not, there is a significant zone of agreement between the two countries on significant issues that could be either consummated under the next administration or serve as the foundation for another kind of agreement.
We've seen developments in the recent past in terms of trade deals when it's the EU and China reaching an investment agreement. Before that, we had RCEP as well. Earlier, Trump had, of course, pulled out of the TPP, and there was a separate 11-member group there. How do you see the United States in terms of international trade? Will TPP be something that President-elect Biden would be looking at again?
So, when it comes to international trade and investment, I think it's worth noting for all of us as we sort of think through these issues to take a step back. The free flow of goods and people and services and capital across borders has been around for hundreds of thousands of years. And it's been something that people have engaged in because of its contributions to prosperity, knowledge sharing, and human progress. This being said, the current era is one of skepticism towards trade. For a variety of reasons, I think the pandemic has made some countries think about the need to have a certain base of operations for essential goods. And there's also concern about where the jobs of the future are going to come from. This being said, I think, the U.S.-India partnership has an internal dynamic where those issues can actually be addressed by closer relationships between the two countries. And I'm hopeful that through a Biden administration, the president-elect and Prime Minister Modi can settle on a series of issues that they can take forward, whether it would be part of a larger group like the countries that have signed the TPP or in a bilateral fashion. So we're hopeful, we're optimistic. We think good things come from these types of agreements. There are significant areas where I think the two countries would like to move forward, whether it's on digital services, climate change, or trusted supply chains. So there's lots of potential there.
one of the priority areas when it comes to the global scene, of course, will be China. And we've seen already statements that have come out from Biden administration or the nominees for top posts there. There was an attempt by Jake Sullivan, I think, to try and put off the EU-China deal, but that didn't happen. But they've made it clear that they're looking at allies again, and Europe would, of course, be one great focus area for the Biden administration. So, in terms of a priority list, can they work simultaneously on various areas, especially when it's coming to China taking center stage around the globe in terms of containment of China, if I can, or constrainment of China?
Yeah, I think the U.S. foreign policy community is the deep bench. You mentioned Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor to President-elect Biden, but there are others as well who are going to be part of a really distinguished group that the President-elect has identified to be leaders and advisors. The Secretary of State is a very talented and very experienced diplomat on the world stage. So I think they can walk and chew gum at the same time, as Americans like to say. So I wouldn't see their engagement with Europe as taking away from their ability to work on other problems as well. But in fact, I would see that their engagement with Europe as part of that. The degree of China's lack of consistency on international norms is substantial. What has happened, aggression on the line of actual control in Ladakh, the new national security laws, infringing on agreements to protect rights in Hong Kong, and its conduct in the South China Sea through expansionist tendencies there, to say nothing of what's happened recently with flyovers of Taiwanese airspace. In order to kind of confront these steps, the world's going to have to do it together. And so I would hope that Europe and the United States would be able to come together to try and get everyone back on track for a rules-based international order, and to work with countries like Japan, Australia, and of course India on a free, open, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific.
And we've seen movement on that front when you're talking about the Quad. It's not just the Malabar exercises and the military dimension to that. There were resilience in supply chains that have been talked about. The cyber issue has also come up there. So that grouping and many other groupings could possibly work together.
I think that's a great point. Look, 2020 is going to be remembered for a lot of things. Obviously, COVID-19 and the global pandemic and the world's reaction to it. It's going to be the headline. But below that, if you look at the U.S.-India relationship, there has been enormous progress that has been made. President Trump came to Delhi at the end of February, signed some significant energy and defense deals. And then this fall has been a flurry of activity. As you mentioned, there was the Malabar exercises in the Indo-Pacific. There was also the Quad ministerial consultation, and that's now going to be an annual event. There was also the 2+2 in Delhi in October, which had some significant movement forward on defense agreements and cooperation in a variety of other areas as well. So the good news is that there's a real momentum and institutionalized framework across different groupings to drive forward this coordinated action. So I'm really bullish on what's the future bears for U.S.-India cooperation.
You mentioned the U.S.-India 2+2, and Becca was signed their last foundational agreement. That itself, and defense is another area where India and the U.S. have been cooperating, and there have been a huge amount of defense deals over the last, 5-10 years or so. How do you see that going forward in terms of the Biden administration?
I think you'll see a continued trend there. I mean, I think it only makes sense for U.S. and India to have greater strategic cooperation. These foundational agreements are critical to India being able to leverage the full capabilities and get the full value of U.S. Defense platforms. In particular, what Becca allows for is increased intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance abilities. And that's something that's truly valuable to India as it takes a larger role in the Quad grouping in the Indo-Pacific on the maritime front, and also in monitoring what's happening up north, both on its eastern and western flanks. And so I think that these agreements are only going to create more momentum for greater integration on the security front between the U.S. and India.
We've seen a new I don't know whether I can call it a model in the defense development field in terms of leasing equipment. I mean, before India would probably do that only with the Soviet Union or Russia now, ex-Soviet Union and Russia. Is that something that, because of the situation, money is also a problem across the globe, not just in India. Is that something significant, or do you think that's just a one-off kind of thing?
Yeah, look, we definitely find ourselves in an environment where economic growth is constrained due to the pandemic. But, I'm hopeful that in the second half of 2021, once vaccine distributions are robust, we're going to see a real snapback. I mean, I think that's what the projections are for the Indian economy. I would expect that for the U.S. economy too. And that's going to have a knock-on effect for fiscal budgets and procurement budgets as well. You've already seen, I think, just this past month, GST receipts in India were at a record high. So again, I'm optimistic about the opportunity to expand a variety of procurement through fiscal budgets as economic growth returns. And we've seen incredible resilience with the Indian economy so far. I'm not sure where things would end up on the leasing front, but I do believe that there will be space in the future for defense procurement on a significant scale to buttress the U.S.-India relationship.
In the defense sector, Damocles sword that hangs over New Delhi is, of course, CAATSA, and that's been imposed against Turkey with the S-400s. How do you see the Biden administration taking up from what the Trump administration did on that? Will they impose sanctions against India on that front?
So I don't think it's clear yet. I do think that this is a thorny issue, but I do think the countries, again, have so much at stake in their relationship, are so invested in it, that they'll find solutions to work through these issues. No relationship is without its issues.
Look at the U.S. and Europe. Otherwise.
True, and the U.S. and Europe, who've had a very robust alliance for 70, almost 80 years now, they too have issues that they are working through, and so I think the U.S. and India can do that as well. I would note that the Biden administration has signaled, and again, it is early days, so it's maybe too much to read into this, but has signaled a desire, at least on the Iran front, to come to a renewed agreement to ratchet down both nuclear enrichment, sanctions, and tensions between the two countries. And I think that also would have ancillary benefits for the U.S.-India relationship, given India's energy policy.
There is, of course, a waiver given on Chabahar because of Iran. When you talk about energy now, a huge amount of cooperation, because there are deals that have been signed while you're waiting for this limited deal and then subsequently an FTA. How do you see that progressing? Iran, we brought it down to zero, the imports from Iran.
Right.
The energy cooperation between the two countries.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you look back at the past year, or even the last 5 years, what have been the main drivers of expanding U.S.-India trade? Energy is at the forefront of that. And so I think that's only going to increase as we move towards a Biden administration where the focus internationally is going to be on low and no emission energy. Prime Minister Modi has made bold commitments, both when he entered the Paris Agreement 4 years ago, 5 years ago, but also since that time in doing things that nobody really thought possible in India in terms of renewable energy generation targets. And so I think that's going to be a really active area of cooperation between the two countries. I think you'll expect to see the United States Development Finance Corporation point a lot of money into that area, as well as climate-friendly infrastructure development in India. And you'll also see U.S. government agencies that provide export finance, really allocating a lot of resources to help American companies provide technology to India that can help meet those goals.
Nuclear energy is one area which hasn't really moved, especially after the nuclear deal, which has had great geostrategic implications, but not in terms of the U.S. companies setting up in India.
Yeah. So, the latest on that, I think, comes out of the 2+2 meeting in October, where the countries reached made a number of statements on nuclear cooperation. They renewed a 10-year MOU on the Global Center for that's in Haryana to promote safety in nuclear energy. So that's a good step forward. The countries have also talked about, the U.S. indicated support for India's early entry into the nuclear suppliers group. On the issue of nuclear power generation specifically, there is this proposal to move forward with 6 nuclear reactors in Andhra Pradesh. And I think that there's still some work to do to get to a potential contract there. And the countries reiterated their interest in doing so. A key issue there will be, will the agreement allow for the generation of nuclear power at a price that is competitive to renewable energy, which I think is about 2 rupees per kilowatt hour now. So, there's some work to do there, but I'm hopeful that the countries can come to an agreement there as part of their efforts to combat climate change and promote, a lower emission future.
There's also a lot of work to do in terms of supply chains, global supply chains. Now, it's not just the pandemic and China. China and Corona have been the 2 C words that dominated 2020, so to speak. How do you see India and the US, either bilaterally or in other groupings, actually moving to get global supply chains moving out of China?
Yeah, so look, I think that what the global pandemic has taught companies is that you need to have diverse sources of supply. No matter how you look at it, putting all of your eggs in one basket is very risky. And there was a real supply shock that came from the opening days of the pandemic when factories in China had to shut or logistics networks in China to get goods out of China were obstructed as a result of efforts to tackle the outbreak of coronavirus. So I think companies are looking for opportunities to diversify their risk. In that respect, India has competition, whether it's from Mexico or Vietnam. We may see a regionalization of this. So India could be a hub for American companies looking to supply to the SAARC region or to the Indo-Pacific region. Again, I think there's great opportunity for that. 2020 showed where U.S.-India cooperation in the healthcare front could be quite productive, and that's in a critical area where safety and security is paramount. Whether it was the exchange of ventilators, personal protective equipment, diagnostics, or therapeutics, there was great cooperation. So again, I'm hopeful that the 2 countries can work together to become trusted supply chain networks. The U.S. can be a great source of knowledge. India can be a great source of manufacturing. And the U.S. can also be a great source of manufactured products for India. So there's, again, huge potential there. There's work to be done, I think, on ease of doing business and managing Atmanirbhar Bharat expectations. But again, I think we can do good work there.
Your comments on Make in India and how that really affects, including with, if I can use the prong of reform as well, when you're talking about trade and how that impacts.
Yeah, there's been great work recently, I think, by the Modi government to try and tackle some of these issues. The simplified labor codes, for example, really make it easier, I think, for U.S. companies and all international companies to manage the regulatory frameworks in India. Now, the rules are still coming out, and we're studying those rules closely. And getting those rules right will be critical to creating an ease of doing business that will attract foreign investment here. We also saw some great progress on, or we hope to see some great progress on the direct overseas listings of Indian companies, which will again make really a fertile environment for U.S. investment in the startup ecosystem here in India. We expect those final rules to come out any day now, and hopefully they'll allow for direct overseas listings without a parallel listing in India, because that's a critical concern and key to unlocking the value of cooperation. On the areas where more work needs to be done, I think regulatory stability and stakeholder engagement is something that the Indian government has improved upon, but still there's work to be done, and they're complementary. Atmanirbhar Bharat has, I think, admirable goals to create jobs in India, to make India a manufacturing powerhouse. But it should also remain focused on making India competitive globally. And that requires you to be open to foreign competition. And you also need clarity on rules so that if companies invest and set up manufacturing hubs here, those goods will not be subject to restrictions, so that the companies that did invest in India are rewarded. And I think there's work to be done on that front, clarifying rules whether it comes to the public procurement order or other ways that the government is pursuing this Make in India policy.
Alexander Slater, again, absolutely appreciate your insight and your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And just for our viewers, if you like to support our kind of journalism, you can go onto our website, Strat News Global, to also follow us on our social media handles on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You've been watching Strat News Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.